All right, everybody, it is the Sports Bash Live. It's football at 4 time. Mike and Mose, John McMullen. We talk football every day, 4 o'clock. Use the hashtag football at 4. And we're getting through our division previews. Today we got the NFC South. Tomorrow's the NFC East. That's like the blockbuster big edition. And then on Friday, we'll go through the whole conference. John McMullen covers the Eagles for 97.3 ESPN.com. And, of course, the full NFL. You can check him out at JF McMullen on Twitter. And, John, we've been talking about throughout the show, and I'm having kind of a rough – I do have a vehicle, actually. My vehicle – I do have a loaner vehicle for the day, so I feel like I've accomplished something here. But I will say it's been kind of tough the last couple of days getting around. And life without a car, you ever experienced that?
I have not yet, but I'm expecting to very, very soon. I feel like the other shoe's about to drop. I think bad things are going to happen.
Oh, you think the...
Now you just brought up bad things.
I thought John still rode around in the horse and buggy. I didn't even realize a car was involved in his life.
Oh, how about that?
Yeah. The age joke. Yeah, I've gotten a few of them. My Social Security numbers and Roman numerals. I get all those.
Have you seen these pictures,
Yep.
these aging pictures that everybody's been posting
I have. I'm so excited to see more. Boy, everybody jumps on that trend.
I know.
I thought it was funny. The first 1,000 pictures I saw, I thought it was pretty funny. At 1,001, I started to tire of it a bit.
Yeah.
But I figured I don't need to do it since you already got the old.
It's funny.
You already got
Rothstein's been sending me the photos of and like I have like grayish like in my beard and stuff, but for the Pete Thompson looks exactly the same. Look at this picture of Pete Thompson, Mosher. He looks exactly the same. I mean, it's uncanny how unbelievably.
I'll tell you, it's all funny until you realize all your information is being stolen by the Russians.
Yeah, that's what I said. The new controversy is Russia created this app and all the conspiracy theorists. I said, now let's think about this, people. There's a lot of people that think they're a little bit more important. I think we should send every meaningless text message to Russia and let them get buried in it, and that's a win for America. That's what I tweeted.
There we go.
My theory on that, by the way, is that the Russians are taking our likenesses and finding out what our political beliefs are, and then creating clone Twitter accounts using our pictures, right, of different ages.
You really thought this out.
So that they're going to put out...
There are no conspiracy theorists.
I know, it's got to be. It's just mine, right? They're going to use all this and get that. Like they're just going to be me with a different political lean, and people go like, "Hey, Mosher thinks this now. Well, then this must be the way we have to
go." All right, let's do our football at 4. Look at the NFC South: Atlanta, Carolina, New Orleans, Tampa Bay. It was New Orleans last season. This one is always up in the air. It seems that there's a different winner every year, and a lot of people think this is going to be entertaining again. We'll see what it brings, but New Orleans at the top. Let's start with them because they were the best, and a lot of people think they're the best again. Drew Brees continues to be one of the league's best quarterbacks. He's got weapons all over the field. Michael Thomas is a beast. Kamara is outstanding. Cook, the tight end, can make plays. I mean, this team is about as complete as they come on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, and a lot of people think they should have been in the Super Bowl last season. Obviously, that's why we have another, what I assume is going to be horrific NFL rule because of the blown PI call. So they're very good. They're very talented. You always look at the quarterback and you start there and say at some point, much like Tom Brady, you don't need the app to show Drew Brees as an old guy because he's an old guy. And at some point, there has to be a decline, you would think. Hasn't happened. Have seen no evidence of decline. Maybe the most accurate quarterback I've seen. They're a good football team, and they're going to win a lot of games, even in a difficult division. I think the NFC South is. You expect them to be one of those teams, one of the few teams that are really in the conversation to be a potential Super Bowl winner.
How much do you think the loss of Mark Ingram to, I believe, the Ravens is going to hurt them and what they do offensively? I know he missed the first 4 games last year, and they had, they lost the season opener and then won a bunch in a row. But in general, it's going to make Kamara have to have a little bit more of an increased role, which could be a good thing, or it could be, difficult on the body for him to see that many more snaps.
Yeah, I mean, they had a nice system set up, and we talked a little bit about Tariq Cohen yesterday. Alvin Kamara, not that bad, but he needs to be on a bit of a pitch count. You don't want him touching the football 30 times, certainly. So it was nice to have that compliment. And they did sign Latavius Murray, who's a veteran who's performed over the years in both Oakland and Minnesota. So I don't think it's going to be a huge drop-off. I think he's capable, and he can sort of take on that role. Probably a little bit of a downgrade, but I don't think it's going to be significant to any degree.
John, their defense, Davenport, Rankins, Jordan, Lattimore, a couple of years ago, their defense was a disaster, and it's slowly gotten better. How good is it?
Well, I think it's still the strength of that team is still on the offensive side of the ball. They have gotten a lot better. We talked about Steve Spagnuolo a couple of weeks ago. When he was there, they were historically bad. So people have been saying for years when the Saints went through that little sort of 7-9 run, I think it was 3 straight seasons where they were 7-9. People would say if they could only get an average defense, they'd be a good team again. And that's pretty much what's happened under Dennis Allen. They're not great, but they're solid. And I think as long as they continue to produce at that kind of level, they're going to be really good because it's difficult to stop that offense. But when you talk about players, you got to start with Cam Jordan, who's legitimately one of the best edge players in this league. And then in the secondary, Marshawn Lattimore, who I think had a bit of a dip, wasn't as good as he was in the past, but he's still one of the better cornerbacks in this league.
Yeah, and I thought, John, to be honest, when you factor in Sheldon Rankins, who kind of came into his own last year, and the kid Davenport we talked about that they drafted in the first round, they're strong in the trenches on defense, and that's really where it starts for them. And we talk about the Eagles all the time, loading up on pass rushers and guys who can win those one-on-one battles, and they've got more than a few.
Yeah, they do. I thought they overpaid to go up and get Davenport, but he's still a good player.
Mm-hmm. So
you start to have those discussions about value versus having the bird in hand. So now that they have him, I think he's a pretty good player. He's pretty solid, and you start to forget about what they gave up to go up and get him. Rankins is a tremendous player, but he's coming off the injury, so you have to be at least a little bit of concern there. But certainly those are two of the names that have contributed to turning this around defensively. And as I said, getting to a level where they're at least not going to embarrass themselves. And when you have the kind of offense they do, all you need is a representative defense, and all of a sudden you're a 12-win team. And that's kind of what has happened.
John, let's look at the Falcons because, we see this in the NFL. You make the Super Bowl, you lose, and then you progressively start to take steps back to the point where you wonder, Matt Ryan, how many more runs at this does he get? Julio Jones, still one of the best. Freeman, always banged up. Sanu, Ridley. I mean, they have some weapons there, but is this Falcons offense where it was when they were a Super Bowl team?
I don't think it's that good, and I think they have to remember Matt Ryan was playing at an MVP level. He's still a top-tier quarterback. You have those spikes where you have better seasons than you do even really good players. So to count on him playing at an MVP level, that's kind of difficult to project. You understand he's going to be productive. I think the big issue has been the offensive line, and they went heavy in the draft with the offensive line. And some people criticized him and said they took Chris Lindstrom a little too early. They took Callum McGarry way too early, but they believe in him. And if they turn out to be correct, all of a sudden they've rebuilt that offensive line in one fell swoop. And I think that improves them dramatically because you do still have Matt Ryan and Julio Jones and Mohamed Sanu. So, they got the skill position guys. And you're right, Tevin Coleman's gone, so Freeman's more is going to be on his plate. But they're fine at the skill positions. Can that offensive line hold up with two rookies projected to be starters on the right side? We'll see how it works out.
And it's interesting, John, because I think personally with their skill position players, Julio and Calvin Ridley had a really nice rookie year last year, Sanu, obviously Devontae Freeman. I think that they're stronger potentially offensively than New Orleans. I actually have some concerns about the Saints because after Mike Thomas and after Alvin Kamara, and you started to see it after the blowout of the Eagles last year. They were relying a little bit too much on the Christian Kirkwoods and the Traquan Smiths and the Josh Hills of the world. I feel like the Falcons are more prolific and more balanced on offense, but again, you're right. It's got that offensive line. If it doesn't hold up, it's not going to matter. But if it does, this to me could be a very, very good offense.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say they're more well-rounded, certainly with the receiver. When you start with Julio and Calvin Ridley and Mohamed Sanu, that's as good as it gets at wide receiver going 3 deep in this league. I mean, nobody's better than that. And you're right with the Saints. I mean, the kind of workload and the amazing production that Michael Thomas had last year. Remember, they brought in Des Bryant at one point because they desperately were looking for the complement. And Ted Ginn was out. He'll be back. But Ted Ginn's not Mohamed Sanu if you want to compare. In Austin Carr, there's some silver lining to when you have some injuries and you got to force young players. And I think you saw that in Philadelphia at cornerback. Maybe you saw that with the Saints at receiver, and maybe some of the younger guys start to develop. I think that's the hope from their perspective.
Yeah, and then Beasley, Jarrett, Deion Jones, very good. This defense, though, I wouldn't say is a Super Bowl level defense. They got holes on this side of the ball.
No, yeah, I agree. I mean, Deion Jones being back is huge. He missed most of last season. He's the modern linebacker. He's one of the guys you point to as the prototype. He's a true 3-down guy, tremendously athletic, can cover. So that's a big help. But up front has been an issue outside Grady Jarrett, who just signed a long-term deal as a franchise player. So he's really good on the interior. McKinley's a pretty good edge rusher. Vic Beasley has the big name, but he's been bad. He's been flat-out bad for really 2 seasons. So they still need help getting to the opposing quarterback. And I think it is fair to say that that is one of the key weaknesses of this team that they'll have to overcome.
Carolina's in a similar boat. Went to the Super Bowl, and then the decline started. Where do they stand right now? Are they a Super Bowl contender? Are they a wild card team? Do they think they can win this division? I mean, Newton's still there. McCaffrey's great. They don't got a lot of weapons. Olsen always gets hurt, but Torrey Smith, DJ Moore, not great there. The line's pretty good, but I don't know offensively if they have enough to be a really scary threat.
No, I think they rely too much on Christian McCaffrey, and it's weird in this era of the NFL. The guy never leaves the field. He's literally the only running back in the league that never leaves the field. And one of the knocks coming out of him, coming out of Stanford for him, was the fact that could he hold up? Well, he's held up, but how many years can you do that? I'm not sure. So they have to find other playmakers, and I don't know where they're coming from. DJ Moore's okay. I mean, Jarius Wright, Torrey Smith is still there. Chris Hogan. I don't know. Curtis Samuel. It doesn't scare you, and it really is Cam Newton, Christian McCaffrey, and everybody else. And anybody who's listened to me for more than 10 seconds know I'm not a North Turner guy. I've been a North Turner guy since he left Dallas. He keeps getting jobs and he keeps screwing up offenses. And I think this is another example of that.
And it's weird because, they brought in Norv. They wanted to be more vertical. They got rid of Kelvin Benjamin and Funchess, 2 guys who were not fast, but, more of a contested catches guy. They draft DJ Moore, signed Torrey Smith, drafted Curtis Samuel. They've clearly tried to become a more vertical team from a personnel standpoint, but then you go watch them play, and even when they beat the Eagles last year, they were basically coming back on little passes across the middle and dump-offs to McCaffrey.
Yeah, and that's because those guys just aren't good enough.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw Torrey up close. Great guy, tremendous in the locker room. He's just not a top-tier NFL receiver at this point. I mean, Jarius Wright, I mentioned, he was a slot guy in Minnesota. Chris Hogan is more of a slot guy, although he plays outside. When he was with New England and even going back to Buffalo, Curtis Samuel is a slot guy. They brought in Aldrick Robinson, who had some success in Washington. He can run, but these are not high-level receivers by any stretch of the imagination. DJ Moore might have that potential, but he's the only guy. And when you have a quarterback like Cam Newton who can get the football down the field, yeah, it gets frustrating. But when you're in the game and you're trying to win a game on a particular Sunday, you just go with what you have. And what do you do best?
Yeah.
And what you do best is dump it off to McCaffrey and get the heck out of the way. And that's kind of what they default to.
They're very good the last couple of years defensively, and they got some names, Short, McCoy. Kuechly never can stay on the field, but when he's out there, he's very good. This is a team that if they want to be a playoff team, it's probably because they don't score a whole heck of a lot, but they don't give up a lot of points.
Yeah, and there's a little bit of a change. No Julius Peppers. Thomas Davis is gone. So they drafted Brian Burns to give him a little bit of an edge rush. He's really undersized, though. I think he's going to be one of those guys that needs a year or two to get strong enough to play in the NFL and be consistent if he gets to that level. So I look at that team and I say, where's the pass rush coming from? And my answer is I don't know. Bruce Irvin they brought over, but he's just a guy.
Dub V.
They have Mario Addison, but I just don't see where the pass rush is coming from.
Well, obviously one of the guys they brought in was Gerald McCoy from Tampa. John, as we move over to the Buccaneers and look at them, talk about a team in transition, new coach with Bruce Arians. Obviously Todd Bowles now presiding over the defense from a 4-3 now. They'll go to a 3-4. They're one of those, to me, wild card teams that you look on paper and you see they've got some good young talent on defense.
Good weapons, man.
And good weapons, but you also wonder if they can kind of escape that identity of being the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Jameis Winston and his issues, with turnovers.
Well, this is my team for the surprise, the worst to first potential.
That's all on Arians. You're lookalike there.
And it has more to do.
We got to get
Bruce
a tangle
Arians.
on him.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It does have more to do with Bruce Arians. But if you look at that staff that he put together and you see the cachet, 2-time Coach of the Year, and you mentioned Todd Bowles, but look at the assistants, Keith Armstrong on special teams. I mean, from where they were as a coaching staff to where they are now, that is a huge difference. So forget about Buccaneers being the Buccaneers. That staff will change that mentality. And then you have to go to Jameis Winston. We all know he has the arm talent. We all know he has the ability. He has turned it over far too much. Bruce has a reputation of being a quarterback whisperer, at least at times. Can he get him turned around? If he can, you mentioned that skill position talent. And Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, the tight ends. Other than Philadelphia, O.J. Howard, Cameron Brate, there might not be a better situation at tight end in this league. That's how good they are there. So there's at least the potential for this to turn around quickly, and I think it has more to do with the coaching staff than even the players.
Yeah, well, you mentioned Winston. You got Winston, Howard, Evans, Chris Godwin. They got plenty of weapons there, but the line's not very good. And look, this is a big year for Winston. I mean, he's on the final year of that deal. He was the number one pick, and I guess he's got some pressure to perform to remain the quarterback. I don't know how much he loves being the Tampa Bay Buccaneers quarterback, but if he wants to stay there, this is a big year for him.
This is it. He's got one more chance. There's no more excuses. He's got a coach with a reputation now as an offensive guy, as a guy who excels with quarterbacks.
But their line stinks.
Their line does stink. That's the issue, and it's very difficult. But we've seen That's a theme in this league, and it's difficult to win. But we've seen teams, Seattle being most notable. We've talked about it a lot with Minnesota. Houston as well had a bottom 5 offensive line last year. Those teams have been able to make the playoffs on a somewhat consistent basis, even with a bad offensive line. I think that limits you as far as being a Super Bowl contender, but it doesn't limit you from being a playoff team. And I think there's the potential to start moving in the right direction. And again, I can't even talk about the chasm between coaching from this year and last year. It's huge. It's significant, and it's going to make a significant difference.
All right, when we think of the Tampa Bay Bucs in their glory years, 3 of them, they were defense, right? You had Warren Sapp and all that crew.
McFarland, Rice.
Garrett Brooks, John Lynch.
Hall of Famer. Yeah, I mean, Vita Vea, Ndamukong Suh, Shaq Barrett, Levante David. How do they stack up with those defenses of the glory years of the Bucs? Is it more like the Bruce the Buccaneer defense?
It's going to be interesting because they'll shift, and Todd Bowles is going to have a sound defense at the bare minimum. So I think that's going to be very helpful. So we point to coaching staff. If you think about where Arizona was when they were really, really good, and Carson Palmer was still there, and their defense and how they ran things, I think that's the hope. They're not going to be able to get there quickly. It starts with Devin White, who's their first-round pick, and he'll be expected to be a 3-down linebacker quickly, and they already have Levante David as well. Jason Pierre-Paul's got the injury issues. You can't count on him, so it's got to be they got to find some edge players, and that's going to be difficult because from a talent perspective, William Golston, Carl Nassib, Noah Spence. It's not going to scare opposing offenses. But if Vea and Sue and Ndamukong Suh can provide the interior push, that's clearly the strength. Maybe they can make those guys look a little bit better than they are.
All right, football at 4. John McMullen at JF McMullen. Tomorrow we'll look at the East. Today's look at the South. John, how do these 4 stack up for you?
Well, I think the Saints are a clear favorite, significant favorite, and they should be. And then I think the Falcons are number 2. The Bucs are the wild card, and I think the Panthers are going to end up being the last place team. That's a very good last place team, but I think that's where they're going to end up. And I think if you look at the Falcons and the Panthers in their Super Bowl seasons, and both of them were Matt Ryan won the MVP, Cam Newton won the MVP. That's really, if those 2 teams want to be significant contenders, they're going to have to get that kind of high-level play from the quarterbacks. I don't think it's possible for Cam with his coordinator and with the lack of weapons at receiver. It's a little bit more possible for Matt Ryan. But it's a really deep division. I think Carolina's going down. I think Tampa Bay's going up.
All right, that is our look at the NFC South. John McMullen at JF McMullen. And don't forget, tomorrow, the NFC East, Eagles, Giants, Cowboys, Redskins, will break them down. And then Friday, we'll look at the conference as a whole. And then next week, Eagles training camp will be here. Mike and Moshe and McMullen here with Football at 4. And he appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Thanks, pal.
All right.